The periscope breaks the surface just long enough for one sweep. Commander Samuel Dealey grips the handles tighter, his knuckles white. It is June 6, 1944, and through the magnified lens he sees something that makes his blood run cold. 3 Japanese destroyers, charging straight at USS Harder's position off Tawi-Tawi in the southern Philippines. Range 1,200 yards and closing fast. Every man in the control room knows the order that should come next. Dive deep, run silent. Pray they pass overhead without detecting you. It is the only rule that has kept American submariners alive for 2.5 years of war. Dealey does not give that order. Instead, he aims his bow directly at the lead destroyer and prepares to fire torpedoes straight down its throat, a maneuver the Navy's own submarine school calls suicidal. 79 men hold their breath as the destroyer's screws thunder overhead like an approaching freight train. What none of them know yet is that Harder has just stumbled onto the most closely guarded secret in the entire Japanese Imperial Navy. By June 1944, American submarines in the Pacific are fighting with one hand tied behind their backs. Torpedo failure rates hover near 50%. Standard doctrine demands caution. Attack from long range. Avoid escorts. Never, under any circumstances, engage a destroyer head-on. In 2.5 years of war, this conservative approach has cost the submarine force dearly. 52 American boats have been lost. Thousands of men rest on eternal patrol beneath the Pacific. 11 months earlier, October 1943, U.S. Pacific submarine commanders gather in Pearl Harbor for an emergency conference. The mood is grim. Admiral Charles Lockwood stands before a map covered in red marks, each one a sunken American submarine. "Gentlemen, we have a crisis," Lockwood begins. "Our torpedo failure rate is unacceptable. Half of our Mark 14 torpedoes either run too deep, fail to detonate, or explode prematurely. Worse, our submarines are achieving only a fraction of expected kills against Japanese shipping. The statistics are damning. In the first 22 months of war, American submarines have sunk far fewer Japanese merchant vessels than projected. The Mark 14 torpedo, rushed into production without adequate testing, carries 4 critical flaws. Faulty depth control, a magnetic exploder that detonates prematurely, a contact exploder that crumples on impact instead of firing, and an overall design fault that makes the torpedo run 10 feet deeper than set. But the torpedo is not the only problem. Submarine doctrine itself is failing. A senior submarine commander presents the conventional wisdom to the room. Submarines must avoid surface escorts at all costs, he says. A destroyer can outrun us, outturn us, and kill us with a single depth charge pattern. Our job is to slip past the escorts and strike the merchant vessels. Hit from long range, 5,000 yards minimum, then dive deep and evade. The admirals nod. It is logical, it is safe, and it is costing them the war. In the audience, a little-known submarine commander shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Samuel David Dealey, 36 years old, from Dallas, Texas, graduated from the Naval Academy in 1930, not at the top of his class, not particularly distinguished. He spent most of the 1930s serving aboard battleships and destroyers before the Navy sent him to submarine school. He has only been commanding submarines since December 1942, when he took USS Harder fresh from the shipyard. Dealey has no advanced tactical training, no combat innovations to his name, no reason for anyone in this room to believe he will be anything other than competent. After the meeting, he approaches Lockwood with a radical idea. "Admiral, what if we are thinking about this backwards?" Dealey says. Lockwood frowns. "Explain." "We are treating destroyers like threats to avoid," Dealey continues. "But destroyers are themselves high-value targets. Every destroyer we sink is one less escort protecting their carriers and battleships. If we could develop tactics to reliably kill destroyers instead of running from them, we could change the entire equation." Lockwood studies him carefully. "Commander, our analysis shows that head-on attacks, the so-called down-the-throat shot, have a success rate below 10%. The torpedo spread is too narrow, the target profile too small, and if you miss, the destroyer is right on top of you, with no time to escape. Permission to try anyway, sir. Why would you risk your boat and crew on a tactic with a 90% failure rate? Because, sir, Dealey says, if we do not change something, we are going to keep losing boats at the current rate. 52 submarines gone. That is over 4,000 men. I would rather die trying something new than die doing the same thing that is not working. The room falls silent. Every officer present knows someone who did not come back. The list of lost boats grows longer each month. Expert consensus is clear. Avoid destroyers. Stick to merchant vessels. Minimize risk. The Imperial Japanese Navy still commands hundreds of warships and escorts. The American submarine force has fewer than 150 operational boats in the entire Pacific. They cannot afford to lose even one more in a reckless attack. Lockwood makes his decision. Request denied, Commander. Follow standard doctrine. Dismissed. As Dealey walks out, he passes a bulletin board posting new orders. USS Harder is assigned to patrol the approaches to Tawi-Tawi, a remote anchorage in the southern Philippines. Intelligence suggests the Japanese may be using it as a staging area. The stakes have never been higher. Allied forces are preparing to invade the Mariana Islands. Success depends on the Pacific Fleet locating and destroying the Japanese mobile fleet before it can interfere. So far, Japanese naval movements remain a mystery. No one in that room suspects that the biggest naval battle of the Pacific War is about to hinge on what one-by-the-book submarine commander discovers and what he decides to do about it. But before Tawi-Tawi, there is a night Dealey cannot forget. During Harder's fourth war patrol, he watched from his periscope as a Japanese freighter exploded from his torpedoes. Through the lens he saw lifeboats lowering, men jumping into the water, scrambling for anything that would float. Then he saw the destroyer escorts race in. They did not stop for the survivors. They ignored the men drowning in the wreckage of their own ship and came instead for Harder, hunting the submarine that had done the damage. They dropped over 100 depth charges on his boat over 6 hours. The explosions came in waves, each one closer than the last, until the hull groaned and the lights failed, and men braced against the bulkheads waiting for the one that would finally crack them open. It never came. When it was finally over, Dealey brought Harder to periscope depth and surfaced to find oil slicks and debris scattered across calm water. The freighter's survivors had drowned while their own escort spent 6 hours trying to kill him instead of trying to save them. That night, in his private journal, Dealey writes a single line that will change the course of the war without his even knowing it yet. The destroyers are the real enemy, not the merchant ships. The destroyers kill our boats. If we could eliminate the destroyers, we could devastate their supply lines, but we are trained to run from them. What if we hunted them instead? It is a heretical thought. Destroyers are built to kill submarines. They are faster, more maneuverable, bristling with depth charges and sonar gear that can trace a submerged hull through hundreds of feet of black water. A Japanese fleet destroyer can carry 36 depth charges and sprint at over 30 knots. Harder's maximum surface speed is barely 20. Underwater, she can only manage 9 knots in short bursts before her batteries run dry. Every tactical manual in the submarine force says the same thing: avoid destroyers or die trying. But lying awake in his bunk that night, Dealey remembers something from his years aboard surface ships in the 1930s, when he served during anti-submarine exercises and learned, from the other side, how destroyer captains think, how they hunt, and where their instincts fail them. He realizes their greatest weakness is assumption. They expect submarines to run. Every doctrine, every drill, every tactic a destroyer captain has ever trained for assumes the submarine below him wants nothing more than to escape. What if we did not run? Dealey asks his executive officer the next morning. What if we attacked them head-on? His executive officer looks at him like he has lost his mind. The Navy calls that a down-the-throat shot, Captain. Training says it is impossible to pull off. Training also said our torpedoes work perfectly, Dealey replies. Training was wrong about that too. The problem is geometry, his executive officer presses. When a destroyer comes straight at you, the target profile is only 30 feet wide. Our spread cannot guarantee a hit. And if we miss, we die. I know, Dealey says. He pulls out a notebook covered in calculations and diagrams, pages he has filled during quiet hours on watch. But I have worked out the math. If we wait until they are close enough that they cannot possibly miss us with sonar, then our torpedoes cannot miss either. At close range, the spread pattern covers exactly the destroyer's width. We fire 3 fish. At least one finds the hull. You are talking about letting a destroyer charge to point-blank range. That is insane. It is unexpected, Dealey says. Which means it might work exactly once before they figure it out, and if it does not work, he closes the notebook, then someone else will have to figure out how to sink these destroyers, because we are losing this war down here. Not on the map. I know we are winning island by island. But down here in our world, the boats keep going out, and they do not keep coming back. He does not finish the thought out loud. He does not have to. Every man in that wardroom has already lost friends to the sea. On June 6, 1944, USS Harder surfaces off Tawi-Tawi just before dawn. Dealey scans the horizon through his binoculars, searching for enemy contacts, expecting nothing more than another quiet morning of surveillance. What he sees instead makes him grab for the periscope handles so hard his knuckles turn white. Through the lens, destroyers. 3 of them heading straight for Harder's position, and beyond them, barely visible in the morning haze, the massive silhouettes of battleships and carriers filling the anchorage beyond. "Get up here," Dealey says quietly. "You need to see this." "The entire Japanese fleet," his executive officer whispers. Dealey's mind races. This is intelligence worth dying for. Pearl Harbor needs to know immediately. But the destroyers have already spotted their periscope. They are closing fast now, their bows throwing white spray as they accelerate toward the tiny feather of wake Harder has left on the surface. Standard doctrine says dive to 400 feet. Go silent. Let them pass overhead and pray. Dealey's hand hovers over the dive alarm. Then he remembers the 52 submarines that followed standard doctrine and never came home. Battle stations, he says. I am going to kill one of these destroyers. Then we are going to run like hell and tell Admiral Nimitz what we found. June 6, 1944, 0800 hours. The lead Japanese destroyer charges toward USS Harder's periscope at 30 knots. Her captain has spotted the American submarine and intends to force it under before it can slip away. A routine anti-submarine tactic. Drive the sub down, then pepper the water with depth charges until oil and debris rise to the surface. What that Japanese captain does not know is that Samuel Dealey has no intention of diving. Range? Dealey's voice cuts through the tension in Harder's control room. 1,000 yards and closing, Captain. Every man holds his breath. The destroyer's screws are audible now through the hull, a rhythmic thrashing that grows louder by the second. In conventional attacks, submarines fire from 4,000 to 5,000 yards, then dive immediately to escape. At 1,000 yards, there is no time for escape. If the torpedoes miss, the destroyer will be right on top of them. Bearing, Dealey's hands stay steady on the periscope. Dead ahead, sir. Through the lens, he sees the destroyer's bow wave. From this angle, she looks massive, a wall of gray steel racing toward them. He can make out sailors on her deck, the muzzles of her forward guns. 900 yards. In the forward torpedo room, 3 Mark 14 torpedoes wait in their tubes. Each one carries hundreds of pounds of high explosive. Each one costs a small fortune to manufacture. Each one still carries roughly a 50% chance of failing to run true. If even one of the 3 hits, the destroyer will break in half. If all 3 fail, there will be no second chance. 800 yards. Dealey does something his instructors never taught him. Instead of only watching the destroyer grow larger through the periscope, he closes his eyes for a moment and runs the geometry in his head one more time. The torpedo spread diverges just enough that at this range it creates a pattern wide enough to bracket the destroyer's narrow bow profile. He has done this math 100 times in his notebook. He needs to be closer still. 700 yards. "Captain, we need to fire or dive." His executive officer's voice rises. "They are going to ram us." Dealey opens his eyes. The destroyer fills his entire field of view now. He can see the bow wave breaking around her hull. The muzzle flashes as her forward guns open fire, shells splashing into the water near their periscope, close enough to soak the lens with spray. 600 yards. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. 3 compressed air charges blast the torpedoes out of their tubes. They leap into the water, propellers spinning up to speeds that will close the gap in seconds. The submarine shudders with the release. Dive. Take her to 400 feet. Rig for depth charge. Harder's bow tilts down sharply. The crew grabs pipes and rails as the boat plunges. The depth gauge spins. 50 feet, 100, 150. Dealey does not need to count the seconds until impact. He has done the math too many times already. The explosion, when it comes, shakes Harder so violently that men are thrown against the bulkheads. Light bulbs shatter. Cork insulation rains down from the overhead. "Hit. We got a hit," someone shouts. But Dealey is already calling out new orders. Belay that. Keep diving. Silent running. Because hitting the destroyer is only half the battle. Now they have to survive what comes next. Above them, the destroyer's hull splits open just forward of her bridge. Her bow tears away, flooding the forward compartments. She slews hard to starboard, her screws still churning uselessly as she begins to go down. But her escorts are already racing toward Harder's last known position, 300 feet. Through the hull, they hear another sound, the splash of depth charges hitting the water above them. Brace. The first one detonates high above, then another, then several more in rapid succession. The explosions feel like a giant hammer smashing the submarine's hull from outside. Men grab onto anything bolted down. The lights flicker and die, plunging the control room into darkness except for the dim red glow of the battle lanterns. In the dark, Dealey's voice stays level. "Damage report. Hydraulic system compromised," the chief engineer calls out. "Lost pressure on the stern planes. Manually compensating. Oxygen reserves are dropping." "Captain," his executive officer whispers, staring at the depth gauge. "What we just did. The Navy would court-martial you if they knew." Dealey wipes sweat from his forehead. His hands are shaking now that the adrenaline is fading. "You know what else is illegal," he says quietly. "Sending men out to die with defective torpedoes and outdated tactics. We just proved this works. Now we need to survive long enough to do it again." Above them, the depth charges keep falling, but Harder slips away into the dark water, leaving the destroyer that hunted her sinking slowly toward the ocean floor. Inside the boat, the silence after an attack is its own kind of torment. No one speaks above a whisper. Every creak of the hull sounds like the opening note of the next explosion. Sweat runs down the necks of men who have not moved a muscle in an hour, afraid that even breathing too loudly might carry through the water above. The air inside Harder has turned thick and sour, heavy with the smell of oil, sweat, and fear that has nowhere to go. When the crew finally surfaces 4 hours later to ventilate the boat, they climb topside in shifts, gulping the night air like men pulled from drowning. Some of them simply sit on the deck plates and shake, unable to speak. Others laugh too loudly, the kind of laughter that comes only after death has passed within arm's reach and moved on. They are exhausted, terrified, and something close to exhilarated all at once. They have just done what their own instructors called impossible, and they are still alive to know it. And waiting for them somewhere over the horizon, more Japanese destroyers, all hunting for the submarine that killed one of their own. June 7th, 1944. 0600 hours. Samuel Dealey composes the most important radio transmission of his career. His hands still shake faintly from the depth charging the day before. Around him, Harder's crew works to patch the damaged hydraulic system with whatever they can spare. Every instinct says they should be running for safety. Instead, Dealey writes out a message reporting the discovery of the Japanese mobile fleet anchored at Tawi-Tawi, its approximate strength, and the destroyer sunk while engaging with the new attack tactic. He hands it to his radio man. "Send it in the clear if you have to," he says. "Pearl needs this now." The reply comes 90 minutes later. It is not from Lockwood. It is from a senior staff officer overseeing submarine operations for the theater, and the order is blunt. Return to base immediately. Do not engage enemy destroyers. Your primary mission is intelligence gathering, not combat. Confirm receipt. His executive officer reads the message over his shoulder. "Well," he says, "that is clear enough." Dealey crumples the paper in his hand. "The Japanese fleet knows we spotted them," he says. "They will move within a day. If we leave now, we lose track of them completely, and the invasion of Saipan starts in little more than a week. Admiral Spruance needs to know where this fleet is heading. Sam, this is a direct order to withdraw." "I will face the consequences later," Dealey says. "Right now there is a destroyer out there that needs sinking, and I intend to give the Navy enough evidence that this tactic works that they will have to change their doctrine whether they like it or not. What happens over the next 3 days will be studied and debated in naval circles for decades. That same day, Harder spots a second destroyer searching for them. Instead of evading, Dealey again maneuvers into attack position and fires down her throat at close range. 2 torpedoes hit. The destroyer sinks in minutes, her stern rising vertically before she slides beneath the waves. By nightfall on June 7th, Dealey has ignored a direct order, sunk 2 destroyers using a tactic his own service once called suicidal, and triggered a full-blown crisis inside the Japanese High Command. Aboard the battleship anchored at Tawi-Tawi, a senior Japanese admiral writes in his diary that the American submarine threat has become intolerable, that losing 2 destroyers in 2 days to a single enemy boat suggests the Americans have developed an effective new method for killing escorts, and that if true, the entire convoy and escort system built around the fleet may be at risk. June 9, 1944, Pearl Harbor. Admiral Lockwood's office turns into an argument. The senior staff officer who ordered Dealey to withdraw has flown in specifically to demand he be relieved of command. He is ignoring direct orders, the officer says. He is risking his boat and crew on tactics that are going to get them all killed. I want him pulled off patrol immediately. Lockwood holds up 2 patrol reports. In 2 days, Commander Dealey has sunk 2 Japanese destroyers, confirmed kills. That is more destroyers than the rest of the submarine force sank in the previous 2 months combined. His tactics may be unorthodox, but the results speak for themselves. The results are lucky survival, the officer snaps back. The down-the-throat shot has a documented failure rate above 90%. He has scored twice out of 6 torpedoes fired, which is either extraordinary luck or reckless overconfidence. Either way, the next time he tries this, we will be scraping his hull off the ocean floor. Voices rise around the room. Someone mentions other boats lost chasing aggressive tactics earlier in the war. Others argue those losses came from different causes entirely, not from the tactic itself. Lockwood's operations officer finally stands and cuts through the noise. "Gentlemen, the question is not whether Dealey's tactics are risky. Of course they are risky. The question is whether they work, and whether we can afford to keep losing submarines to a conservative doctrine that is not working either." Lockwood raises a hand for silence. Dealey reported discovering the Japanese mobile fleet at Tawi-Tawi. Intelligence confirms that is their primary anchorage. If his information holds and he can keep tracking their movements, that intelligence alone may be worth more than a dozen submarines. And if he gets himself killed, the staff officer demands. Then he gets himself killed, Lockwood says evenly. But I will not order a successful commander to stop doing what works, just because it makes the rest of us uncomfortable. Dealey has sunk more enemy destroyers in 2 days than most boats sink in an entire war patrol. Until he fails, I am letting him continue. "This is madness," the officer says. "This is war," Lockwood answers, his voice going cold. And in war, we do not get to choose between safe options and dangerous ones. We choose between losing slowly with conservative tactics or winning quickly with aggressive ones. I choose winning. The room falls silent. No one moves. Every man there understands what has just happened. An admiral has staked his own reputation, and quite possibly a submarine crew's lives, on a single officer's judgment against the objections of his own staff. It is the kind of decision that either ends a career or rewrites a doctrine, and there is no way to know which until the next patrol report arrives. Lockwood turns to his radio man. "Send to Harder. Continue mission. Weapons free. Sink enemy destroyers at your discretion. Good hunting." 9,000 miles away, Dealey receives that message while stalking a third destroyer. He reads it once, then hands it to his executive officer without a word. "Well," his executive officer says quietly, "now we really have to make this work." "We are about to find out," Dealey replies, "if I am a tactical genius or just the luckiest man in the Pacific." That same day, a third Japanese destroyer closes on their position. Dealey lets her come in close before firing. 2 hits. She breaks apart and goes down fast. 3 destroyers in 4 days. The Japanese Navy has never faced anything like it, and they are about to make a decision that will reshape the entire Pacific campaign. June 10, 1944. 05:30 hours. Samuel Dealey has not slept in nearly 2 days. Harder's crew runs on coffee and adrenaline. The hydraulic system is held together with patch welds and prayer. Oxygen reserves are dropping toward dangerous levels. Standard procedure says to surface, ventilate the boat fully, and withdraw to safety. Instead, Dealey surfaces just long enough to recharge the batteries and send one more report to Pearl Harbor, this one filled with precise data, attack ranges, torpedo spread patterns, hit percentages. He is no longer just sinking destroyers, he is documenting exactly how to kill them, turning his own patrol into a training manual for the entire submarine force. But the real test comes at dawn. Through his periscope, Dealey sees something that makes his stomach drop. Not 1 destroyer, not 3. 6 Japanese destroyers moving in a coordinated search formation, hunting specifically for the submarine that has killed 3 of their own. And behind them, moving out of the anchorage at Tawi-Tawi, the 2 largest battleships ever built by any navy on Earth. The Japanese are not just hunting anymore, they are fleeing. "Captain, that is a full convoy escort," his executive officer warns. "And they are sweeping with sonar. They know we are here." Dealey studies the formation through the scope. The destroyers are spread in a picket line, sonar pinging steadily. Behind them, the battleships move slowly, cautiously, wrapped in layers of escort. The entire Japanese mobile fleet is abandoning its secret anchorage because of one American submarine. Their planned offensive to reinforce their island garrisons and draw the American fleet into a decisive battle is falling apart without a staging base to support it. Dealey does not know the full strategic picture yet. All he knows is that 6 destroyers are hunting him, and if he does not stop them, they will eventually sink his boat. "We are going after the lead destroyer," he announces, his voice flat and certain, as if he has already run the outcome a dozen times in his head and found no better option. "Sir, that is suicide," his executive officer says, his voice cracking. "Look at the plot. 6 ships, full sonar coverage, no gap in their line wide enough to slip through even submerged. We cannot possibly." "Count the destroyers," Dealey says. 6. "Now count our forward torpedo tubes. 6. If we can reload fast enough, we might sink all of them, or they might sink us trying. Then we had better not miss," his executive officer says, and for the first time in hours, something like a grim smile crosses his face. The lead destroyer's captain has received direct orders from his own admiral. Locate and destroy the American submarine terrorizing their forces. He is a veteran with years of experience hunting submarines, and he is confident that this American boat, damaged and running low on supplies, will follow the standard evasion procedure every submarine captain is trained to follow. He is about to learn that Samuel Dealey does not follow any procedure but his own. Sonar contact, the Japanese sonar operator reports. Range 20,000 meters. The destroyer's captain smiles. The submarine has made a mistake staying so shallow. All ahead flank. Prepare depth charges. The destroyer surges forward, her bow wave rising as she accelerates past 30 knots. Behind her, the other 5 destroyers hold formation, ready to box in the submarine once their lead ship forces it under. What that captain does not see is that Harder is not running. She is maneuvering into position. 1,500 yards, Dealey calls. Through the periscope, he watches the destroyer charge straight at him. The geometry is close to perfect. Her bow points almost directly at Harder's tubes. 1,000 yards. Sir, 2 more destroyers are closing from the side, his executive officer warns. Dealey ignores them. Once you commit to a shot like this, there is no backing out. You hit or you die. 800 yards. Through the lens, Dealey watches sailors moving on the destroyer's deck, preparing her depth charges. They expect him to dive any second. They expect him to run. 700 yards. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. 3 torpedoes leap from Harder's tubes, racing toward the destroyer. Dealey does not wait to see if they hit. Emergency dive. Take her to 400 feet. Harder's bow drops hard. The depth gauge spins, and aboard the lead destroyer, the sonar operator shouts a warning, far too late. Her captain has just enough time to realize his mistake before 2 torpedoes tear into her hull. The explosions rip the destroyer apart. Her forward section floods instantly. Her stern rises with the screws still spinning, and she goes down in under 2 minutes. But Harder's fight is far from over. 5 destroyers remain, and all of them are converging on her position. For the next several hours, Harder endures the most intense depth charging of the entire patrol. The Japanese drop wave after wave, turning the water above them into a killing zone. Inside the submarine, men brace silently as explosions rock the hull again and again. Cork insulation disintegrates into a fine, choking dust. Pipes rupture. The temperature inside the boat climbs past 100 degrees. Oxygen levels sink to dangerous lows, and men begin to gasp, their vision narrowing at the edges. Hydrogen reading is critical in the battery compartment, the engineer reports. 1 spark and we are finished. Dealey sits against the bulkhead in the control room, calculating in silence. They cannot surface. Destroyers wait above. They cannot run. The batteries are nearly dead. They cannot hide. Japanese sonar has them located. Around him, young sailors who enlisted barely a year ago sit with their knees pulled to their chests, lips moving in silent prayer. Rosaries and pocket photographs gripped so tightly the edges cut into their palms. An older chief petty officer passes quietly among them, resting a hand on a shoulder here, murmuring a steady word there, the way a man does when he has survived enough depth charge attacks to know that panic kills faster than water pressure ever could. And then, hours into the attack, the depth charging simply stops. Through the hull they hear the destroyer screws fading slowly into the distance. "Why are they leaving?" his executive officer whispers. "They had us dead to rights." The answer comes later, when Harder finally surfaces and intercepts Japanese radio traffic. The entire Japanese mobile fleet is withdrawing from Tawi-Tawi. Their planned offensive has been canceled. The battleships and carriers are retreating, moving away from where American intelligence can track them easily. Dealey stands on the bridge as the sun sets over open water, the first calm he has felt in 4 days. Below him, the crew works through the night patching what they can of the hydraulic system, welding cracked brackets by lantern light, coaxing a few more hours of life from batteries that should have failed already. No one complains. No one asks to turn back. Something has shifted among them, a quiet, hard-won confidence that was not there a week ago. They have looked at the worst the Imperial Navy can throw at a submarine and come out the other side. Dealey does not yet know the full weight of what they have accomplished. He does not know that the fleet now retreating behind them is fleeing not because of any single battle, but because his boat, damaged and running on fumes, has made their most secret anchorage untenable. He only knows that 4 destroyers rest on the ocean floor behind him, that his crew is alive, and that somewhere out in the dark, Allied codebreakers are already reading the very radio signals he forced the Japanese Navy to send. Within days, the American fleet will know almost exactly where the Japanese are heading, toward a stretch of open ocean called the Philippine Sea, where American aircraft carriers are waiting. June 19, 1944. The Battle of the Philippine Sea begins. American carrier aircraft slaughter Japanese planes in what pilots will later call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Japan loses hundreds of aircraft and several carriers in a single catastrophic day, the decisive naval defeat of the Pacific War. It happens in part because the Japanese fleet was forced to abandon its hidden anchorage at Tawi-Tawi, forced to operate in open waters where American submarines and search planes could track its every move. All because one submarine and one commander proved that a single boat, using tactics the Navy itself called impossible, could unravel an entire fleet's plans. By the end of June 1944, every American submarine in the Pacific receives new tactical guidance. The down-the-throat shot is no longer forbidden. It is doctrine. Submarine captains are now authorized, even encouraged, to engage Japanese destroyers aggressively when the geometry favors them. The tactics proven aboard Harder become part of standard training at submarine school. The war beneath the waves has changed, one impossible shot at a time. The official numbers arrive over the following weeks, and they confirm what Dealey already knows in his gut. Before his 5th patrol, American submarines attacking Japanese destroyers succeeded roughly 1 time in 10, usually firing from long range and diving away before they could confirm a hit. After his 5th patrol, the down-the-throat tactic, executed properly at close range, succeeds far more often, and destroyer kills that once averaged less than 1 per patrol across the whole fleet become almost routine for boats willing to try it. The impact on Japanese operations is immediate and unmistakable. A senior Japanese admiral writes in his diary that the loss of so many destroyers to a single American submarine has forced a complete reconsideration of their operational planning, that they can no longer safely maintain forces at Tawi-Tawi, and that the submarine threat now exceeds anything they projected. Harder herself limps into port for repairs in the weeks that follow, barely afloat, her hull cracked in several places from the pounding she has taken, her hydraulic system all but destroyed, her oxygen tanks run down to nothing. But she comes home. Dealey steps onto the dock to find a crowd of submariners waiting for him, veterans of other boats who have heard what Harder accomplished. A chief petty officer from another submarine approaches him, eyes red, and tells him that his own boat lost men last month to a destroyer attack, that they followed standard doctrine, that they ran when the manual told them to run, and it did not save them. "You proved there is another way," the chief tells him. "Some of us might make it home now because of what you figured out." Behind him, submariners on the dock begin to applaud, the sound rolling across the water. Dealey stands there for a moment, stunned, his cap in his hand, unsure what to do with his own face. He has defied a direct order, broken with everything his service taught him, and staked his crew's lives on a theory scratched into a private notebook during quiet hours on watch. And now these men who face the same black water and the same odds every time they leave port, are thanking him for it, some of them with tears cutting clean lines through the salt and grime still on their cheeks. He does not give a speech. He shakes hands one after another, and when a young sailor asks him how he knew the tactic would work, Dealey only shrugs and says he did not know, not for certain, not until the first torpedo hit. He tells them the only thing he was ever sure of was that the old way was killing them slowly, and slow deaths are still deaths. Some of the men on that dock will carry those words with them into their own attacks in the months ahead, in moments when the manual says dive and every instinct screams to run. But Samuel Dealey's story does not end with applause on a dock. War does not grant its heroes an easy retirement. August 24th, 1944. 0730 hours. USS Harder submerges for what will be her final patrol. She is on her 6th war patrol, operating alongside 2 other submarines off the coast of Luzon in the Philippines, hunting Japanese convoy traffic in the waters near Kaiwa Point. Dealey has just received orders to investigate reports of enemy ship movements nearby. What he does not know is that a Japanese coastal defense vessel is patrolling those exact waters, hunting specifically for American submarines operating in the area. That morning, the Japanese vessel's sonar operator picks up Harder running submerged. The ship drops a depth charge pattern directly on target. The explosions detonate close enough, deep enough, and in the right sequence to crush Harder's hull beyond any hope of survival. There is no warning, no long chase, no chance for the calculations Dealey once ran 100 times in his notebook before every attack. 79 men, Samuel Dealey among them, die in an instant, far beneath the surface of the sea he had spent 2 years learning to fight in on his own terms. News of the loss reaches Pearl Harbor slowly, in the quiet, bureaucratic way such things always do. A missed radio check, a patrol area gone silent. Days pass before anyone is willing to say aloud what the silence almost certainly means. Admiral Lockwood, the same man who once staked his own authority on Dealey's judgment, is said to take the loss harder than almost any other of the war, a grief made sharper by the memory of the argument in his own office, and the choice he made to let a brilliant, stubborn commander keep doing what worked until, finally, it did not. The Navy declares USS Harder missing in October 1944. She is officially presumed lost that winter. More than a year later, Commander Samuel David Dealey, age 37, is posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. President Harry Truman presents it to Dealey's widow at a ceremony in Washington. The citation credits him with conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, praising a daring that bordered on the reckless, and superb leadership that stood as an inspiration to every submarine crew that came after him. But the truest measure of what Dealey accomplished shows up not in medals, but in numbers. Across his 6 war patrols, Harder is credited with sinking more warship tonnage than almost any other American submarine of the entire war, including 5 confirmed enemy destroyers, more than any other submarine skipper achieves in the Pacific conflict. Within months of his final patrol, the destroyer kill rate for the entire American submarine force nearly triples compared to the rate before his tactics became standard doctrine. Dozens of additional Japanese destroyers go down to American torpedoes in the year that follows, sunk by crews trained on lessons Dealey paid for with his own notebook, his own risk, and eventually his own life. Naval historians later estimate that thousands of American submariners survived the rest of the war in part because the destroyer they once had to flee from, they now knew how to fight. Captured Japanese records, reviewed after the war, include a striking final assessment from the same admiral who once wrote about Harder in his diary. He describes the American submarine as having accomplished what an entire task force could not, forcing the abandonment of a strategic anchorage and disrupting the Japanese fleet's operational plans through tactical innovation that exceeded anything in their own defensive planning. He calls Harder's loss, coldly, the first positive development in the Japanese anti-submarine campaign in months, an admission from the enemy himself of exactly how much damage one submarine and one commander had done. The Navy later names a destroyer escort in Dealey's honor, a ship that serves for decades pioneering new anti-submarine technology, a strange and fitting tribute to a man who spent his career hunting the very kind of vessel that now carries his name. In 2024, 80 years after she went down, the wreck of USS Harder is finally located resting upright on the ocean floor off the coast of Luzon, her bow still pointed forward, as if frozen mid-charge. No remains are recovered. Under international law, she remains a war grave and will stay exactly where she lies. Modern submarine officers still study Dealey's patrol reports at the Navy's submarine school in Connecticut, poring over the same range calculations and torpedo spread diagrams he once worked out alone in his bunk by lantern light. The lesson passed down through generations of submariners is simple, repeated to every new class of officers who will one day face their own version of the order to dive and run. Sometimes the tactic everyone calls impossible is the one that wins the war, if someone is willing to risk everything to prove it. Samuel Dealey never sought recognition for what he did. He avoided publicity, declined interviews, and spent his brief stretches of leave quietly with his family rather than chasing headlines about his own kills. When asked once why he took such extraordinary risks, he gave a simple answer. 52 boats had not come home, he said, and that meant thousands of men who had done everything exactly by the book. If the book was not working, someone had to write a new one. He wrote it quietly, without fanfare, in torpedo wakes and sinking destroyers. He wrote it in patrol reports that rewrote naval doctrine from the bottom up. And he wrote it, most of all, in the lives of the submariners who came home afterward because the tactics he risked everything to prove finally worked. 5 Japanese destroyers rest on the floor of the Pacific, evidence of a commander who refused to accept that submarines could only run and hide from the ships built to hunt them. And somewhere in the dark water off Luzon, USS Harder still sits upright at the bottom of the sea, her tubes still aimed forward, forever caught in the instant before an attack that never had the chance to come.